This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Dozens feared dead in Tanzania fuel tanker explosion. Messages of encouragement and support as South Africans celebrate Women's Day. And hidden mysteries lie in wait inside Kenya's rich fossil treasury. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, foreign firms start receiving licenses to trade in Ethiopia. And in sports, Egypt forward Mohamed Salah on target as Liverpool beat Norwich in the English Premier League opener. A massive fuel tanker explosion in eastern Tanzania's Morogoro has claimed at least 50 lives. That's according to preliminary reports. Some sources quote as many as 70 people. Rescue operations and emergency services have rushed to the spot. Morogoro is about 200 kilometers from Tanzania's economic hub of Dar es Salaam. Moments before the explosions, amateur videos shared by eyewitnesses show residents siphoning the leaking fuel. Shortly afterwards, the explosion generated thick smoke covering the area. Well, for more on this, we are now joined on the line by a local journalist, Isaac Lukando, who is in Dar es Salaam. Thank you very much for joining us, Isaac. Can you give us the latest details you have on the incident?
Well, Karen, the majority of the people in Tanzania are now aware of the news of the incident that happened this morning around 7 a.m. in Morogoro, which is about 200 kilometers from the commercial capital, Dar es Salaam. So social media and various news outlets right now are awash with the news of the gruesome incident involving a fuel tanker overturning and bursting into flames. And the reports at the moment are, as confirmed by the Morogoro Regional Police Commander, Robert Mtafungwa, he confirmed that around 60 people were killed, although there are now reports of the number even going up to 70 people, but that hasn't yet been confirmed. As we speak, the police are still investigating the matter.
And Isaac, do you know yet what led to this incident?
Well, preliminary reports indicate that the majority of those that were killed were motorcyclists who had thronged the accident scene to collect leaking fuel, and there were also food vendors doing business along the Dar es Salaam-Morogoro highway. The particular place in question is a bus terminal called Msamvu, which is a very focal area where a lot of people is very populated, and so these cyclists went there in the hopes of getting fuel, and some eyewitnesses claim that one of the people there took a battery from the truck, igniting the inferno, and other eyewitnesses claim that it was somebody who went onto the scene smoking a cigarette that ignited. But this hasn't been confirmed, so we're still waiting on the final word from the police, who are currently on the scene investigating.
As you were saying earlier, the death toll could be higher. We know at least 50 people have died. What is the state of those who have been injured, and how are local hospitals coping?
At the scene, there are firefighters from the Tanzania People Defense Force as well as the fire brigade who've been working tirelessly to carry out a rescue operation. And the bodies of those who have died have been preserved at the Morogoro Regional Hospital, as well as those who have been injured. There are about 70 people that have been injured. The number could be higher. And so the scene at the Morogoro Regional Hospital right now is that there are a lot of people. It's quite populated there, relatives trying to figure out what happened to their relatives, perhaps relatives who went to work in the area this morning and they haven't received any news from them. So the area is pretty crowded. But perhaps I assume that it will be only until later when we'll get a full picture of the number of injured and their state and the full number of people that have died from the incident.
Thank you very much for joining us, Isaac. That was local journalist Isaac Lukandu there in Dar es Salaam following that tanker explosion in Tanzania. Well, the tragedy there is sadly not the first of its kind on the continent. In 2013, a similar incident killed at least 29 people on the outskirts of the Ugandan capital, Kampala. In Kenya, back in 2009, at least 130 people were killed after a tanker explosion in a similar incident in a rural town of Sachangwan. Further afield in West Africa, Nigeria has witnessed several incidents linked to fuel tanker explosions. Though warnings have been issued, poverty is the binding force, leading many to gather at the accident scene.
Once beating, twice shy. That idiom does not seem to apply to many when it comes to scooping fuel from petrol tankers involved in accidents in Nigeria. It's far too common to see people scurrying for fuel from a falling fuel tanker, even though they're well aware of the risk. And when an explosion occurs, as is always the case, the result is death, sometimes in high number. In January this year, around 60 persons were killed in the Nigerian southern city of Calabar while scooping fuel from a tanker that ran into a ditch. This is after similar incidents had occurred elsewhere in the country, where a number of persons were killed. But the victims of the Calabar incident simply didn't learn from the previous accidents.
One of the root causes of this continuous loss of life through people going to scoop fuel has to do with our societal values. Our values as a society and our value as individual members of the society. The only reason why people go and be scooping fuel is because they believe they can make easy money out of it. Even if I scoop 5 liters, if I have a generator, I put it there, why will I go back there again if not for the lure of the money that I think is behind it? So the next thing to do in tackling this thing is to educate people that it's wrong for you to want to benefit from another man's misfortune.
That education is hardly lacking. In Nigeria, for instance, the government often runs media campaigns discouraging people from approaching fallen petrol tankers and scooping fuel. But the recurrence of the incidents simply means many are not heeding the warnings.
One of the values that we should begin to look at as a society is the importance of human lives, because it's human beings that improve the society in which they are. And where human beings don't realize that anything they do that makes them irrelevant in the scheme of things in society, such as going to scoop fuel, that eventually results in the loss of life, will result in the loss of the quality of the human resources that is in that society, that will eventually improve the worth of that society.
Poverty has also been adduced as one of the reasons why hundreds of men and women have died from tanker blast across the continent. Survivors of such accidents often say they plan to sell the fuel on the black market to make a living for their families. But the issue certainly goes beyond poverty. People are simply not learning their lessons. Deji Badmo, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
To other news now. South Africa and the country has commemorated Women's Day by remembering the 20,000 women who marched in defiance of the apartheid pass laws in 1956. This year, President Ramaphosa delivered a Women's Day address acknowledging the gender struggle. Other issues highlighted on the day were rising levels of femicide, rape and abuse, despite the country's progressive laws. Tunisian Prime Minister Youssef Chahed announced his official candidacy for the presidential elections. Chahed was not selected by the country's ruling Ennahda party as its candidate. The Islamic movement opted for Abdel Fattah Mourou, the current parliament speaker, to run for office.
Prime Minister Youssef Chahed and president of the political party Tahya Tunis filed his nomination papers Friday for early presidential elections.
I have gathered 31 sponsorships from members of parliament. The position of the President of the Republic is a great responsibility, and it requires a person with clean hands, a guarantor of the Constitution and the democratic transition.
Sheikh Abdel Fattah Mourou, the al-Adha Islamic Movement deputy leader and current head of the House of the People's Representatives, is the party's first presidential candidate since the movement was established 50 years ago.
I have the support of my party and the Tunisian people. I'm entering a new phase of struggle for Tunisia. My goal is to serve Tunisia and to bring people together while preserving national pride and dignity.
Analysts assert that the country's Premier Youssef al-Shahed and Parliament Speaker Abdel Fattah Mourou should resign after submitting their candidacy for the September 15th presidential elections. Al-Shahed said he will not resign, and Mourou declared that he will remain the temporary Speaker of the Tunisian Parliament during the presidential campaign.
Shahed and Mourou should have resigned because they are still in power. Both candidates emphasize they'll ensure that state affairs are not affected by their candidacies.
The September 15 vote comes after Beji Qaid Essebsi, the first president to be democratically elected in Tunisia after the 2011 popular uprising, died last month, aged 92. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Time for a short break now. Lots more to come, including Egyptian private and public sectors take week off to commemorate Eid. And a $44 million plastic recycling factory set up to create low-cost textile fibers from plastic bottles.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Ucheopo reporting from Nairobi's City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
An estimated 2 million Muslims have gathered in the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia for the annual Hajj pilgrimage. As one of the 5 pillars of Islam, every able-bodied Muslim who is also financially able is required to take this journey at least once in their lifetime. The pilgrims will walk around the Kaaba, a cube-shaped structure at the Grand Mosque of Mecca, at least 7 times. Afterwards, the worshippers are expected to climb Mount Arafat, where they'll gather for prayers and recitals. From there, they'll participate in the symbolic stoning of the devil by picking up pebbles along the way to an area called Mustalifa. The series of religious rites are expected to take place over a period of 5 days.
Today is the phase of getting up the pilgrims from Mecca to Arafat. Since 6 o'clock in the morning, we sent some of our pilgrims there. The number of our pilgrims is 3,100. We still have 1,000 pilgrims to go. The facilities here are good, and we are here to serve the pilgrims.
Well, the Eid al-Adha festivities for Muslims around the world begin on Saturday evening and last for 4 days. Muslims celebrate Eid twice a year. Yasser Hakim looks at how Egyptians are preparing for this week's event.
Eid festivities are back. This year, most of the private and public sectors have taken the whole week off. There are certain traditions linked to the Eid. Essential is buying new clothes to the children to spend the Eid. So shopping for the kids is the main order of the day.
We prepared for Eid with a new collection and higher variety of clothes because this is the high season for us. We concentrate on clothes for ages 2 to 12 or 14 because that's where most of the demand is by families who prefer to buy for their children, not themselves.
I'm shopping for Eid clothes for the boys. We'll spend most of the Eid week visiting friends and relatives, and they also visit us, especially the ones we don't meet much during the year.
The Eid is celebrated twice a year. The first Eid is the one after the holy month of Ramadan. As for this week's Eid, it's officially called the Eid of the Sacrifice, but Egyptians like to call it the Meat Eid because this is where well-off Muslims would buy sheep or cows and distribute its meat to the poor who cannot afford it. It honors the willingness of Prophet Ibrahim to sacrifice his son as an act of obedience to God's command. Therefore, just before the vacation, Egyptians go to buy sheep or cows to eat over lunch in Eid and give the rest to the poor.
I am looking for sheep with good weight, over 50 kilos each, so I can take some of its meat and distribute the rest. The prices are cheaper than last year because there's a lot of imported cattle from Sudan, which has pushed prices down in the market.
The clients request certain things when they buy sheep for Eid, mainly to be over 6 months old and heavy with good meat. Most people prefer sheep that are heavier than 60 kilos. You can tell their age from the teeth. 6 small teeth are young sheep. The old ones have 8 teeth, which are larger in size.
Meanwhile, the Ministry of Interior announced it has deployed extra police forces around the country to secure the festivities and ensure safe holidays. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The first batch of 48 students from Senegal under the China-Africa Friendship Scholarship Program have received scholarships to study in China. This is part of China's commitment to scale up cooperation with Africa. The students will study in various Chinese universities for undergraduate, master's and doctoral programs. The awarding ceremony was held at the Chinese Embassy in Senegal. Some of the beneficiaries say studying in China will give them a better chance of advancing in their professional careers.
I studied geology at the Sheikh Anta Diop Dakar University. I finished my master's there. I was planning to study in China after my bachelor's degree, so getting this scholarship is a crucial step in my professional life, since it is a part of my future career aspirations. And I realize it will be a big part of my life. China is a country that's good for geological studies, so I'm going there to study mineral exploration, to deepen my knowledge of the mining field that I love so much. It really is a very important part of my life.
Here in Nairobi, a $44 million plastic recycling factory set up to create low-cost textile fibres from plastic bottles is running at a third of capacity. The Chinese investor who started the factory had hoped to cash in on the global glut, but prices nosedived after China barred the import of low-grade plastic waste in 2017. Here's CGTN's Brian Toussaint with the details.
A sea of crumpled bottles spill across the courtyard of Lucy Luo's $1 million plastic recycling factory that opened in Nairobi this April. This is one of a slew of regional initiatives tackling the world's spiraling plastic waste crisis. But despite coming up with this initiative, Lucy's machines remain idle, as she cannot get anything close to the 2,000 tons of plastic she wants to recycle each month.
We have the packing bed machine there. One day they need 25 tons. And we have another crush machine, they are one day like 35 tons. Now we have that two machines working enough for this material come to us. That's why going to that machine stop for the packing bed machine.
Many African nations struggle to recycle plastic. Poor waste collection lies at the heart of the problem. And just like many developing nations, Kenya has no recycling infrastructure, leaving waste pickers to scavenge through trash bags outside homes and stinking mounds of refuse at dumps so as to recover the types of plastic that Lucy's factory needs. Companies like Coca-Cola and Unilever have founded Petco Kenya to subsidize the collection of polyethylene terephthalate, the plastic commonly used in drink bottles.
If we not enough material, where business is supposed to lose, because we have master workers, we have electricians, also have workers, anything we must pay them, and also rent this place.
Due to the pressure received from governments and environmentalists, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Unilever, and Diageo formed an African Plastic Recycling Alliance in March. And in Ghana, 8 beverage companies have started the Gripe Recycling Initiative and are courting a Canadian company to set up a factory producing textile fibers. According to an October 2018 Greenpeace report, consumer brands Coca-Cola, Unilever, and Nestle are among the world's biggest producers of plastic trash. Global policy experts say Africa's low rate of plastic collection could be transformed if customers pay a deposit, refunded when plastic bottles are returned, just as glass bottles. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Africa is the cradle of evolution. However, the trail is often hard to track because of limited efforts in getting the archaeological records of man's origins in East Africa. In Kenya, the main repository of archaeological records, the National Museum in Nairobi, struggles to create space for the freshly unearthed remains while discovering precious unmarked pieces among its historical files. Beryl Ororo brings us that report.
The National Museum of Kenya's Paleontology Department has a collection unrivaled in East Africa and one of the world's great fossil treasures.
This is a skull of a modern crocodile, and I want to show you at about 3 million years the kind of crocodiles that used to exist during that time.
Though celebrated, the Institute faces a great challenge. The main wing has changed little since legendary paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey first started stockpiling his finds there in the early 1960s. Now, the space is packed with evidence from the past. Between 7,000 and 10,000 new fossils arrive at the lab every year. Gigantic skulls of ancient crocodiles compete for space with bygone species of horned giraffe, while the tusks of early African elephants take up valuable real estate. Even the windowsills are littered with petrified remains of all manner of wonderful creatures.
It shows the wealth of Africa in terms of our past ecosystems and what used to be in Africa, and we can do reconstructions of the environment from these, the possible diets from these, and what other animals they would have interacted with.
Including the only known remains of a prehistoric mega carnivore larger than a polar bear that researchers only this year declared a new species. Locally known as Simbakubwa Kutoka Africa, whose unveiling made headlines around the world, though it lived in a nondescript drawer in downtown Nairobi. Though first excavated on a dig in western Kenya in the early 1980s, an enormous backlog further burdened by limitations among professionals in the already short-staffed field locally, the mega carnivore went unrecognized and hidden for years.
99% of those people who work here are foreigners, foreign people. So it will be important for people in Kenya to understand the importance of this to the country and venture or study things to do with human origins and evolution.
The prevailing less than prestigious attitude against paleontology has created limitations in the field, not to mention the lack of other archaeological specialists and limited financing. The museum staff, however, hope to update the storage systems and adopt new technology like the micro-CT scan that would allow for a fresh look at the museum's most forgotten corners where possible links to old stories lie. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
It's a familiar sight, people living with disability begging in Nigeria, but one young woman is daring to be different. Stella Samuel has been suffering from paralysis since the age of 3, but rather than beg, she's making a living and paying for her education by making hair. Our correspondent, Deji Badmus, has the story.
Arriving the home of one of her numerous clients in Abuja, Stella is here to make the hair of the baby of the client. After all the formalities, she gets down to serious business. With swift dexterity, she gently weaves the baby's hair. Stella has been making hair for this family for the past 2 years. And like this family, several others in Abuja keep calling back for her services. She's been suffering from paralysis on her right side since she was 3 years old and couldn't walk until she was 10. But rather than turn to street begging as some in her condition often do in Nigeria, she made up her mind to stand on her own by taking to hairstyling.
There's that inner strength that made me to say, okay, yes, I will not give up on myself. I just keep on believing that, yes, no matter what, I still have to work. And besides, I don't want to depend on anybody. I don't want to be a liability to anybody. So I feel, yes, it's just one side of me. So the other side can still do what it needs to do.
Even at home, Stella does all the chores by herself, not letting her disability stand in her way. Her clients say they are inspired by her hard work and that she's a role model to young people in the country.
Despite everything that she has been going through, she still makes sure she does something for herself. She's not begging around. She's not complaining, sitting there complaining that the government is not doing that, the government is not doing this. At least she finds something for herself to do.
Stella started a hairstyling enterprise in 2010. She advises young people to creatively think up solutions to challenges around them, regardless of their circumstances.
They should have something special or something that gives them joy doing. They should do it to make sure that, okay, they are not just any from one point. You know, it helps to cover up some gaps or some lapses whereby they need to provide for the family, just to make sure that they have something doing.
Stella is paying herself through school with the money she makes from her business. She's studying banking and finance in the university. But beyond that, she says she plans to expand her business and hopes her story will be able to inspire disabled beggars on the streets to give up the trade and do something more dignifying for themselves. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Now to some international news. Protesters have been demonstrating at Hong Kong's international airport, and they're expected to continue over the weekend. The protests and riots are already impacting the economy. Hong Kong's Purchasing Managers Index, a key economic indicator, sank by over 4 points in just 1 month, the worst downturn in over a decade. Chief Executive Carrie Lam said the government's administrative meetings will resume on Tuesday. That's 2 weeks earlier than scheduled. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's former Deputy Commissioner Lau Yip-Shing is coming out of retirement to help address the ongoing unrest. He's been appointed Deputy Commissioner on special duty for the next 6 months. Pakistan has decided to ban all forms of cultural exchanges with India. These include diplomatic visits, a friendship express railway, and even movies. Meanwhile, a silent protest was held in New Delhi over India's decision on Monday to end the autonomy of Indian-controlled Kashmir. Protesters question the government's move and say the process is undemocratic. The Indian side of Kashmir has seen a lockdown and a near-total communications blackout, but authorities eased a curfew for Muslim Friday prayers. We are going to a short break now. We've got all the business news coming up, including Foreign firms start receiving licenses to trade in Ethiopia. And Uganda Airlines confident of taking to the skies this month.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Ethiopia has taken its first steps in liberalising its tightly controlled financial sector. The country has granted a business licence to a foreign-owned company for the first time. The licence, issued on Thursday by the Central Bank of Ethiopia, went to a unit of the New York-based Africa asset finance firm, Ethio-Lease. The latest move signals Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's progress with the economic reforms he pledged when he took office last year. Ethio-Lease is set to bring in a wide range of leasing services for multiple sectors in Ethiopia. It'll offer long-term leases worth $600 million to companies and individuals that are unable to import due to foreign exchange shortages. A new mobile banking service launched in South Sudan is changing how business is being carried out in the country. Many transactions are in cash, and it's hoped that the new technology will help change that. CGTN's Patrick Hoyt reports.
A bank account holder can now use a mobile phone to transfer money from one bank account to another. An account holder can also purchase goods using mobile banking service. The service was launched by Kenya Commercial Bank, or KCB, in South Sudan. Some business people in Juba are reacting to the introduction of the service.
It will be very easy for someone to do any transaction from one account to the other, transferring money from one account to the other, be able to check their balance and get to do this transaction without the need of even going to any of the KCB's branches. So it gets to make life very easy.
Kenya Commercial Bank says it will continue to invest in technology to improve its services.
The same way we came into South Sudan in 2006, when there was more uncertainty, we will still not shy away from investing in South Sudan because we are there for long. We are not a temporary investor in South Sudan.
Most of South Sudan's banks are in the capital, Juba. Mobile banking service is expected to make transfer of money to rural areas easier.
We are all excited because we think it is a huge opportunity for us really to expand financial inclusion to our people, because with this one now, even where there are no bank branches, people will be able to benefit from financial services, whether it is transfers or things like that.
South Sudan's government is encouraging financial institutions across the country to come up with technologies that would discourage people from carrying large sums of cash. There have been rise in cases of robbery in the country because many here have been carrying huge sums of cash. With the coming of mobile banking, it is hoped doing business would become easier and cases of robbery with violence would reduce. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Uganda's national carrier, Uganda Airlines, has announced that it will commence commercial flights at the end of this month. The airline will, in its first phase, start with flights to Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, Mogadishu, Kilimanjaro, Mombasa, Bujumbura and Juba. It's expected to add more destinations, including Kigali, Goma, Lusaka, Johannesburg, Harare and Bongi in the second phase. In 2001, the government, headed by President Yoweri Museveni, liquidated the carrier due to mismanagement and accumulated debt. However, Uganda's government announced plans to revive the carrier in a bid to reduce the annual local expenditure, estimated at $420 million. It's been almost 2 years since Robert Mugabe was ousted as president of Zimbabwe. Emmerson Mnangagwa took over in November 2017, promising change and a revival of the economy. But the economy remains battered and bruised, and inflation has skyrocketed.
Zimbabwe may have new leadership, but it still has old problems, a flailing economy that's heading into a hyperinflation.
The main reason that there is a lack of confidence in the economy and in this is because the political reforms that are necessary aren't being tackled in a manner that is satisfying the international community. So one of the findings we discovered last week when we were in Harare is that I think this government, the Mnangagwa government right now, is aware of the fact that this mantra of reform, reform, reform is being pushed.
Despite the slow pace of reform, many Zimbabweans living here in Johannesburg say that they're happy that Robert Mugabe is no longer at the helm. But for the majority, it's still a painful struggle. They have to work long hours to save enough money to send back home. And with the rapid rise of inflation, that money in Zimbabwe is not worth much. So many of them have resorted to buying simple goods like oil and rice just to send back. All of this behind me is destined for Bulawayo.
We do not regret the military intervention in 2017, a coup or no coup, because it needed to happen. But we made a fundamental mistake. When the coup happened, we needed to constitute a government of national unity whose focus was going to rebuild the Zimbabwean economy.
The government has stopped all use of any foreign currency, declaring the Zim dollar sole legal tender. Shelton Moyo lives here in Johannesburg. He buys what he can, but sending it home is also becoming expensive.
They cannot have access because of the price change. Let's say a 12 kg of rice here, it will cost double back home. So it's now it's a challenge. It's now a challenge for them. Whether it's about money.
I am struggling to have enough money to buy enough feed for all 70 of my cows back in Zimbabwe. So what I do is feed the cows whose health is deteriorating first. It's 200 rand per bag to buy, then to send home, it's 100 rand.
The inflation rate in Zimbabwe was at 6.48% in 2009. Inflation is now at 175.66%. Smishra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
The African Development Bank has been working on a massive project to drastically improve transport in Cote d'Ivoire's capital, Abidjan. The aim is to transform the city's infrastructure as well as facilitate economic activities. CGTN's Penina Karibe caught up with Marie-Laure Akin-Olugbade from the African Development Bank to find out whether the transport project, estimated to have cost just over $860 million, is on track to meet its 2021 deadline.
Today, we expect that the deadline will be met, and maybe with even some good prospect that this bridge could be delivered ahead of time.
What is the expected impact of this project once it's complete?
We think that this is a bridge that is going to significantly enhance all the urban function in Abidjan, but it will also, of course, significantly reduce the congestion. During the processing of the project, our teams estimated that the annual cost of lack of efficiency in the public transport system could cost about 5% of the GDP to the country. So we believe that with this type of infrastructure, once completed, we will have a significant reduction in this cost. The project is really meant to link up the west side of the city of Abidjan, and we are linking this western part to the eastern part, which is the direction basically to Ghana and Burkina Faso. So this whole corridor also has also a regional dimension, in the sense that we are going to be able to transport goods from the port of Abidjan all the way to the hinterland countries of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. We also see a lot of impacts in terms of the environment. And for that, we have actually partnered with the Green Environment Fund, who is providing some financing to this project, about $7 or $8 million, because they are particularly interested in the reduction of greenhouse emission, of course. And here in this project, we have calculated that we are maybe probably about 1 million tons that could be saved on an annual basis.
Are there any other projects you're focusing on outside of Abidjan?
In Cote d'Ivoire, we have a portfolio of about $2.2 billion in total. This is a portfolio that has significantly grown in the last 3-4 years. It has been multiplied by, I think, between 2013 and 2018, this portfolio has been multiplied actually by 8. And in this portfolio, we do a lot of transport infrastructure, but not just actually roads, but also we are now investing, and we are looking at, for example, airport, airline industry, which is another mode of transport that is critically needed in West Africa. And this is about 50%. 50% of all that we do in Cote d'Ivoire is around the transport infrastructure development. And then about 25% is energy. And here we are working both in terms of generation, but also in connection, distribution. And then the third, but not the least, and this is an area that is growing. I must say that 3-4 years ago, agriculture was not such a big area of emphasis for us in Cote d'Ivoire. And we are now investing big in the agriculture sector, and really through what we call the spatial agro-industrial processing zone. So we are really exploring this idea and actually already implementing it in a number of areas.
Infrastructure development is one of the key focus areas for the bank, and we've seen China as well champion the Belt and Road Initiative, a big deal here in the African continent. How does the bank work with China in regards to infrastructure development?
The bank has a very good relationship with China. As you know, China is a shareholder of the bank, and is also a major donor of the African Development Fund. So this is a relationship, and we have a very strong support actually from China. And this support is not only in terms of being members of both the African Development Bank and the fund, but also by the provision of a $2 billion facility, which is called the Africa Growing Together Fund, which is a facility that basically the bank administers on behalf of China, and in co-financing projects that have been identified by the bank.
Chinese high-tech firm Huawei has unveiled its new operating system called Harmony. The announcement came during its developer conference in the Chinese city of Dongguan. The company says the new system is lightweight, compact and powerful. It'll be used first for smart devices like watches and in-vehicle systems. Huawei plans to roll out Harmony OS in the Chinese market first, before a possible expansion overseas. Its success will depend on a dynamic ecosystem of apps and developers. To encourage more people to adopt the operating system, Huawei is releasing it as an open source platform worldwide.
Harmony OS is not designed just for smartphone, but for all the smart devices. So we have the capability to make this is our OS is for the next generation OS. The leading technology for new generation, next generation OS. So it's kind of running for all the smart devices, all AI, all the smart devices. We want it to be a global standard, not just the Huawei Harmony OS. It's a worldwide, the global Harmony OS. It's for everyone.
Over 1.5 billion Muslims across the globe are preparing to celebrate Eid al-Adha this Sunday. It's one of the holiest days in the Islamic calendar and is usually marked after the completion of the Islamic pilgrimage Hajj. But in the run-up to the three-day event, prices of sheep in Tunisia are soaring, as CGTN's Adnan Shawashi now explains.
This cattle market is located in the north of the capital city Tunis. The Minister of Agriculture has paid a visit to the market. Samir Bittayib said the prices are reasonable this year.
The state has created 156 cattle markets, where the price is controlled and the sheep are in good health. Mutton prices for this year are unified. Protecting the purchasing power of Tunisians is our responsibility.
On the occasion of Eid al-Adha, hundreds of farmers and sheep breeders have come from inner regions to sell the precious lamb to the consumers in the capital city Tunis.
Price is higher than last year because the cost of transportation and hay has skyrocketed in the past 12 months despite a record harvest this year. Everything is expensive. We are forced to cope with the market even if we are selling less lamb.
With Al-Adha Grand Feast approaching, sheep markets have witnessed a low customer turnout. Despite the 20% increase in the price of meat, Tunisian families consider the Eid al-Adha as the most sacred day of the year. The middle class saves money for months to buy a sheep in this period.
The lamb has cost around $260. It is not my initial budget, but I bought it for this religious day and for my children.
I do not leave the market from dawn to dusk. I have fun during the week, which precedes the festivities. I like to spend time with my sheep. It's difficult to sacrifice it, but this is our religion and tradition.
The Ministry of Social Affairs, 2,750 sheep will be provided for the needy families. The ministry will also distribute financial assistance to 10,000 low-income families.
Over 1.5 million muttons are now for sale at cattle markets. 400 veterinarians will be mobilized by the Ministry of Agriculture in 24 regions on Eid al-Adha. They will provide free sanitary control of sacrificial sheep. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
After the break. South African couple hopes to create African comic universe.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Cote d'Ivoire have hosted the International Crafts Week SIAB 2019 in the city of Grand Bassam. It focused on the theme crafts and tourism. The just concluded third edition celebrated the diversity of African craftsmanship, from masks and loincloths to paintings to furniture. More than 15 African countries were represented and 15,600 items from the various craft sectors were showcased. Grand Bassam is listed as one of UNESCO's World Heritage Sites and was attended by hundreds of exhibitors coming from different countries.
I came with different products. These are decorative objects made from the horns of zebus. And I also have products made from straw such as baskets and ladies' handbags. I also have leather goods made from crocodile skin such as clutches and ladies' bags. I hope to make many contacts and, if possible, partnerships to be able to sell artisanal products from Madagascar here in Cote d'Ivoire.
I came to the exhibition and I'm really happy to be here. I'm making my contacts that will allow me to boost my sales in future. Indeed, we are satisfied and the attitude of the customers encourages us.
There is a communication that is established between the craftsmen of Africa and that allows them to exchange through artworks which are the fruit of their mind. We desire that through SIAB, all craftsmen may present and transmit their know-how to the world.
We've got all the sports news coming up for you after the break, including Egypt forward Mohamed Salah on target as Liverpool beat Norwich in the English Premier League opener.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every